I always thought that living in Seville would be peaceful. My name is Catalina, and at 30, I enjoy my life working as an online marketing specialist from home. The house I live in was a gift from my uncle, a gesture I deeply appreciated. It's a charming place, with high ceilings and bright, airy rooms. I had no idea how quickly my sanctuary would turn into a battleground. It all started about a year ago. I was in the middle of a project, carefully crafting an ad campaign, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before going to answer. To my surprise, there stood my parents, Marta and Juan. They looked rather distressed. "Catalina, we need to talk," Marta said as she stepped inside, her voice tinged with worry. "Sure, what's going on?" I asked, trying to gauge their mood. My parents had been facing financial trouble ever since our old family home started falling apart. Renovations were far beyond their budget, and their income couldn't keep up with the rising costs. One looked around the house, and before long, he said, "This place is enormous. It seems like a waste for you to live here alone. Why don't we move in?" I was stunned. "Wait, what? You can't just decide to move in here without talking to me first. I have my own life and work to consider." Marta chimed in, "Well, your father and I don't have a place to go. We've already sold our house. This one is perfect for us." I felt my heart sink. But this house was given to me by Uncle Luis. He told me I could use it as I please. Juan's face turned red with frustration. "Luis gave you this house. You didn't even ask for it. You took advantage of the situation." "That's not true," I retorted. "I simply had a conversation with Uncle Luis, and he offered it to me. It wasn't some scheme." Despite my protests, my parents had already made up their minds. They planned to move in the very next weekend. Reluctantly, I agreed to let them stay, but only because I couldn't just leave them without a place to go. The day they moved in was chaotic. Boxes were everywhere, and my parents seemed to be in a perpetual state of discontent. They began to criticize my lifestyle immediately. "Catalina, you're already 30. Don't you think it's time to consider settling down and getting married?" Marta asked one evening as we were unpacking. "I'm happy with my work," I replied, trying to keep my cool. "I don't need a husband to validate my choices." "Look at your sister, Isabel," one said. "She's married and working for a company. You could learn something from her." I sighed. Isabel's life isn't perfect either. She's just a temp in a dead-end job. I may not have a conventional career, but I'm successful. Marta's eyes narrowed. "At least she's trying to build a family. You just sit at home and mess around on your computer." Their words cut deep, but I tried to brush them off. I knew that their generation didn't fully understand the nature of remote work, but their constant belittling was hurtful. Then, things got worse. Isabel, my younger sister, showed up unannounced one day, carrying a suitcase and looking as disheveled as ever. "Catalina, hi. I've come to stay," Isabel announced without preamble. "Wait, what's going on?" I asked, bewildered. "I'm going through a divorce and need a place to crash," she explained. "So, I'll be staying here from now on." Before I could say anything, Isabel headed upstairs and claimed one of the guest rooms. My frustration was mounting. Not only was I now sharing my home with my parents, but Isabel's unexpected arrival made things even more stressful. The tension in the house grew. Marta and Juan's constant comparison of me to Isabel was unbearable. Despite their financial struggles and Isabel's divorce, they treated me as if I were the failure of the family. To cope with the stress, I decided to adopt a pet. A friend of mine had a Persian cat named Luna that needed a new home. Luna was the sweetest little creature, and I hoped she would bring some comfort to my increasingly chaotic life. When I brought Luna home, my parents and Isabel were initially skeptical. "A cat? Really, Catalina?" Isabel asked, looking disdainful. She's a great companion, I replied, ignoring the judgment in her voice. Besides, she's my responsibility, not yours. The family's attitude towards Luna softened once they met her. They couldn't resist her soft fur and gentle purring, but the peace was short-lived. One afternoon, while I was busy working, Luna had a little accident on Isabel's clothes. Isabel's rage was explosive. Catalina, how could you let your cat do this? These were my favorite clothes. I tried to explain that Luna was still adjusting to her new home and that accidents happen, but Isabel wasn't having any of it. This is your fault. Pay for the cleaning or else. The confrontation left me shaken. I didn't know what to expect next. The tension in the house was now unbearable. As the days passed, the hostility continued to grow, and it seemed like every action I took was met with criticism. The situation at home was becoming unbearable. It felt like every day brought a new challenge, and I was struggling to keep up. Isabel's anger over Luna's accident only marked the beginning of the tension. One evening, as I was working on a new marketing campaign, Marta barged into my office. "Catalina, we need to talk," she said, her voice dripping with irritation. I looked up from my computer, weary. "What's it about this time?" "It's about Isabel's clothes," Marta began. "She's been complaining nonstop. She's asked for compensation, and I think it's only fair." I felt a surge of frustration. I've already explained that Luna is still getting used to her new environment. Accidents happen. I'm not responsible for replacing Isabel's clothes. Juan, who had been standing in the doorway, nodded in agreement. "Catalina, you should have been more careful. It's not like we can afford to keep replacing things." I tried to remain calm. I don't have the money for that. And honestly, Isabel should be more understanding. I'm already doing my best to accommodate everyone. Their criticism didn't end there. Isabel, who had overheard our conversation, stormed into the room. "You think you're so superior with your fancy job and your big house. But this is about respect, Catalina. I'm not asking for much, just a little consideration." My patience was wearing thin. "Respect goes both ways, Isabel. I've put up with more than I should have already." Days passed, and the hostility in the house continued to escalate. Every small issue became a major argument. Isabel seemed determined to find fault with everything I did. Even the smallest of mistakes were magnified into huge problems. Then came the turning point that pushed everything over the edge. One night, as I was preparing dinner, I heard Isabel arguing with my parents in the living room. Their voices were raised, and the conversation was quickly turning ugly. Curious and anxious, I walked into the room. "What's going on?" Isabel's face was flushed with anger. "Catalina's cat soiled my clothes again. I've had enough. She needs to get rid of that animal." My heart sank. "Isabel, it was one accident. Luna's still adjusting. Can't you be a little more patient?" Juan jumped in, his voice firm. "Catalina, this isn't just about the clothes. It's about the fact that you've been neglecting us. We're living here too, and you need to take responsibility." The argument grew heated, and before long, Isabel and my parents were demanding that I and Luna leave the house. "We're not comfortable living here with your cat," Isabel said, her eyes blazing. "Either the cat goes or you do." My shock turned to anger. So now I'm being kicked out of my own home? Because of a minor issue with Luna? "Yes," Marta said sharply. "It's not just about Luna. It's about how you've treated us. You've been ungrateful and inconsiderate." I was devastated. The house that had once been my sanctuary was now the source of my misery. I knew I had to make a decision. The idea of letting my family dictate my life was unacceptable. I had been pushed too far. That night, I lay awake, my mind racing. I knew I had to take action. I couldn't let my family's entitlement and disrespect drive me out of my home. I needed to reclaim my independence. I decided to contact Uncle Luis. I dialed his number and waited for him to pick up. Catalina, how are you? Uncle Luis's voice was warm but tired. Hi, Uncle Luis, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need your help. I want to discuss the house. There was a pause on the other end. What's the matter? I took a deep breath and explained the situation. My parents and my sister have moved in, and things have become really difficult. They've now demanded that Luna and I leave. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry to hear that, Uncle Luis said sympathetically. If you want, I can officially transfer the title of the house to you. You can do what you need to do. The offer was a lifeline. Yes, please. I think it's time I made some changes. The next few days were a whirlwind. I worked with Uncle Luis to get the paperwork in order. The title was officially transferred to me, giving me the authority to make decisions about the property. As I signed the final documents, I felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. The house was now officially mine, but the true test was yet to come. The confrontation with my family was far from over, and I knew it would be a challenge to stand up to their demands and hold my ground. The tension in the house was palpable. Every corner seemed to echo with unspoken resentment. Isabel's complaints had become a daily ritual, and my parents weren't any better. It felt like my home was being suffocated by their anger and demands. The day after I finalized the house transfer, I decided it was time to let my family know what was happening. I gathered them in the living room, feeling a mix of nervousness and resolve. Luna, my loyal Persian cat, sat beside me, sensing the change in atmosphere. Everyone, I need to talk to you, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. I've had enough of the way things have been going. I've contacted Uncle Luis, and the house is now officially mine. Marta's face turned pale. What are you saying, Catalina? I'm saying that I've decided to sell the house, I said firmly. I can't continue living like this. I've endured enough disrespect and unfair treatment. Isabel's eyes widened in shock. You can't be serious. This is our home too. Yes, but it's my home, I countered. And I'm not going to stay here under these conditions. You've all made it clear that you don't want Luna here, and you've disrespected my space and my life choices. I can't stay in this environment anymore. Juan's face turned red with anger. You're being unreasonable. This is a drastic step. It's not drastic, it's necessary, I replied. I've tried to be understanding, but you've all pushed me too far. I'm not going to be a doormat in my own home. The room fell silent. My parents and Isabel exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of fear and disbelief. They had expected me to back down, but I was resolute. I'm giving you 2 weeks to find alternative arrangements, I said, feeling a pang of guilt but standing firm. After that, I'll put the house on the market. Marta's voice trembled. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my responsibility, I said, trying to maintain my composure. You've made it clear that you don't want me here, and now it's time for me to act on that. As the days passed, the atmosphere in the house grew even more strained. My family's panic set in as they scrambled to find a place to live. The arguments became more frequent, and their attempts to appeal to my sense of guilt grew desperate. Isabel tried to reason with me, but I remained unmoved. One evening, Isabel approached me with a look of defeat. Catalina, please. I know we've had our differences, but this is really hard for us. Can't you reconsider? I shook my head. Isabel, this isn't just about me anymore. It's about standing up for myself. You and Mom and Dad have treated me poorly for too long, and now it's time for me to reclaim my life. As the deadline approached, I made the final preparations to list the house. I contacted a real estate agent and started getting everything ready for the sale. The process was stressful, but it also brought a sense of liberation. I was finally taking control of my own future. The day before the house was set to go on the market, I held a final meeting with my family. The tension was thick as we sat in the living room, the last remnants of our shared life together. "This is the final notice," I said, my voice steady. "Tomorrow, the house will officially be listed for sale. I'm leaving with Luna, and you need to be out by then." Isabel and my parents looked at each other, their faces a mix of anger and resignation. They knew they had pushed me to this point, but it was clear that the reality of their situation was sinking in. "I hope you understand why I had to do this," I said, feeling a wave of sadness. "I wish things could have been different, but this is what needed to happen." As I packed up my things and prepared to leave, a part of me felt a pang of regret. But the overwhelming need to protect my own well-being outweighed the sadness. The house that had once been my refuge was now a symbol of conflict and hurt. The next morning, I left the house with Luna by my side. The street outside seemed brighter, and the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. I was moving on to a new chapter in my life, one where I could finally find peace and rebuild my sense of self. After leaving the house, the world felt different. The weight of family expectations and resentment was finally off my shoulders. I arrived at my new apartment in Seville, a cozy, pet-friendly place with a welcoming atmosphere. Luna seemed to sense the change too, her content purrs filling the quiet space. I spent the first few days unpacking and setting up my new home. The apartment was small but filled with light, and it quickly began to feel like a sanctuary. Luna adjusted to her new surroundings with ease, finding her favorite spots and curling up in the sunniest corners. Despite the initial relief, there was still a part of me that was troubled by the fallout of my decision. I worried about my parents and Isabel, wondering if they had managed to find a new place to live. I had cut off all contact, not out of malice, but because I needed to protect my own mental health. One afternoon, I decided to take a walk around my new neighborhood. As I strolled through the vibrant streets of Seville, I felt a sense of renewal. The sun was shining, and the air was filled with the sounds of a lively city. For the first time in a long while, I felt a genuine sense of freedom. A few days later, I received a letter from my former home, delivered by a mutual friend. It was from Isabel. Her letter was filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. She wrote about the difficulties they had faced in finding a new place and the strain it had put on our family. There was a tone of regret, and she expressed her hope that we could eventually reconcile. Reading the letter, I felt a pang of empathy. Despite everything, I couldn't ignore the fact that family bonds were still there, even if strained. However, I knew that reconciliation would need to come with time and perhaps some understanding from both sides. For now, I needed to focus on rebuilding my own life and finding my own path. As weeks turned into months, I settled into my new routine. My work as an online marketing specialist continued to thrive, and Luna remained a comforting presence in my life. The apartment, once a symbol of change and challenge, became a place of peace and happiness. I found new friends in the city and began to explore Seville's rich culture and history. My life was beginning to flourish in ways I hadn't imagined. I also started volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding joy in helping other pets and their owners. Reflecting on the journey, I realized that my decision to take control of my life was the right one. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my sense of self and finding a way to live authentically. The experience had taught me the importance of standing up for oneself and setting boundaries, even with those we care about. As I watched Luna play in the sun, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. My life was no longer defined by the conflicts and disrespect of the past. I had emerged stronger and more self-aware, ready to embrace whatever the future held. Catalina's story, marked by conflict and resolution, highlighted the complexities of familial relationships and the importance of self-respect. The journey from strife to empowerment was not easy, but it led to a new beginning, where peace and personal growth were finally within reach.